Hello, everybody, and welcome to our latest HR on the Offensive live stream. I have our co-founder of Lace Partners, Kathy Akrotopoulou, who is joining us for the first ever live stream. Kathy, you all right?
I'm good, thanks, Chris. I'm excited. I've been on lots of podcasts, but my first live stream.
This is the first one. So we're going to talk for about 10, 15 minutes about a piece of content that we're about to produce. We're going to release a blog, hopefully this week, which is focused on what we call the 4 hats of the CPO. And you've done a piece previously where we've talked about the 2 hats of the CPO, but we're evolving it now even further. So what I wanted to do today is just talk about those 4 hats of the CPO, talk about what they are and how that can impact. But before we do that, it might be a bit worth us doing a bit of a framing exercise, if you like, because this is part of a campaign that we're launching at the moment. And the campaign is called Demystifying HR's Operating Model. So we've already released a couple of pieces on that. But for people who may just be joining us or finding out about the campaign itself for the first time, can we do just a 1 minute about what the campaign's about? And then also let's move into how the 4 hats of the CPO link into it.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. And hopefully some of our viewers will have seen some of the campaign that's already gone out there. Essentially, what we're trying to do is to provide a little bit of expert guidance and input on what's driving changes to the HR operating model if you're a CPO and HR leader. Why is it that you might feel that you need to change? And actually, if you're going to change your operating model, what are your options? Because there's a lot of content out there when you're reviewing different models, different perspectives. And actually, we're trying to consolidate that in one place and give some guidance on actually how to choose what's right for your organization, how to take account your organizational context, depending on what you're looking to achieve and what your people outcomes are that you're driving for as an HR leader. So as the name suggests, we're trying to demystify everything that's out there and put it in one place so it's easy to digest, easy to understand, and give our perspective, our guidance on how you can get the most out of your HR operating model going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And then so let's link that to the CPO stuff. And because the reason why we want to link this to it is this is a conversation. The operating model stuff is HR's operating model is something that I know that you've talked about with CPOs as part of our various forum activities. We have a collective of CPOs that we regularly talk to, clients that we talk to. This is something that's been on their agenda, their operating model for, well, quite some time. I know that you certainly have been talking about it for well over a year. So can we talk a little bit around why this is so important to CPOs, and then we'll get into the specifics of each of the hats, as we call them, and what they mean.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, over our 10-year history at Lace, we've regularly worked with clients to actually define their operating model and improve their operating model. And I guess it's particularly relevant at the moment because businesses are going through a huge amount of change. We've got financial and commercial uncertainty from an economic environment that's changing. We've got political uncertainty with an election coming up this year. And all of those things are putting businesses under pressure in terms of how they're performing, which always leads to questions around how they can drive efficiencies or how they can get more productive in terms of their workforce. So actually, as an HR leader, you're often now asked with questions around actually, how can you drive that productivity? How can you still continue to attract and retain talent? And it maybe raises questions around overall your people strategy and the people outcomes you're looking to achieve, which naturally leads into a conversation of, as a function, an HR function, a people function, are we set up in the right way? And I don't just mean structurally, but in terms of our capabilities, our ways of working, our systems, our technology, our tools, are we set up in the right way to deliver those maybe changing business requirements, those changing people outcomes that we know are imperative to our business success? So those are the sorts of exam questions we're often talking to clients about at the moment. And I think it's particularly relevant with the level of change that businesses are going through right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, let's delve into the hats then. So hat number 1, talk to me about the service expert.
Well, I mean, I'd first like to reflect on the fact that the CPO is juggling a lot of hats. We're using this analogy because we can all visualize how hard it is to keep multiple hats on your head at one time. But ultimately, this is juggling a number of different demands, a number of different capabilities that sometimes are in conflict with each other as well. But if you're a CPO, we know it's a really challenging role. We know it's incredibly demanding. We know it's wide and varied. So what we try to do with the 4 hats is to try and encapsulate the 4 main areas of focus that either you as an individual in the CPO role or your function that you're leading needs to excel at. So we can talk through each of those in detail, but the service expert, for example, is actually the one we probably all think about if you're an employee or a line manager, because what it is the 24/7 always on advice and guidance that you expect from HR as a function. So if you're an employee looking for guidance on the policy, or looking to query something around your pay, or if you're a line manager who's trying to deal with either maybe a performance issue, or an employee who's got a particularly challenging issue in their personal life, you're looking for that advice and guidance. How much of that should be digital? How much of it should be actually through people in HR providing support? And actually that's sort of what tools and guidance and content can you provide to your whole population of the organization that you're supporting? How can you do that as efficiently and as effectively as possible? So how can you be a service expert with a service mentality to ensure that you're getting excellent advice and guidance and excellent support 24/7? That's a big challenge for anyone, right? But that is one of the hats that a CPO is trying to wear. And it takes up a lot of time, because this can create a lot of noise if it doesn't go well as well.
Yeah, one of the questions I do want to ask you, but let's get through the other hats first, but I'll pose it now so that I give you a chance to kind of reflect on it, is whether CPOs that you speak to, or that we speak to, or that we know of, find a certain hat a little bit easier to wear than others. But park that just for a second, because let's move on to the experience architect.
Yeah, absolutely. The experience architect. So we've just finished a campaign all about the EX revolution, the employee experience revolution. And what that was setting out is actually, whilst we are facing financial and economic challenges, the talent market is still strong, right? So therefore, the need to differentiate in a talent marketplace is as strong as ever. And therefore, actually having really compelling experiences that you offer your employees when they work with you, how you can differentiate compared to the competition. What is the promise that you make to your employees, and does the reality of working in your organization match up to that promise? You need to be an architect. You need to be able to understand, firstly, what are the experiences we want to offer, and design them and develop really compelling experiences that do differentiate you. And then secondly, you need to know if you're actually delivering them. So gathering the insights, the information that enable you to continually improve the experience and track how your experience is stacking up against the reality. Because we know if the experience you're offering meets or exceeds the expectations of your employees, then you will be generating goodwill towards the organization. You're generating engagement, you're generating positivity, and ultimately productivity and retention. So these are all value drivers for the organization. So that experience architect role is critical.
Yeah, and we've done blogs and podcasts where we talk about, who owns that experience, and why HR should be, or why CPOs need to really sort of embed themselves in their thinking of, I need to be a front and center of this. So certainly what we can do is we will reiterate some of that in some of our follow-ups that we do. If you want to, you can check out the EX Revolution campaign. But if you go into the Lace Insights section, if you just type in experience, or we've got a filter that talks about experience, there's a whole host of different areas. And we also talk about what Kathy's just talked about there in the two hats piece. But of course, we're talking you through the evolution, because no more can a CPO be wearing just two hats. The third hat of our four, the business transformation enabler. Talk to me a little bit around why we've selected that as a particular call out.
It's a catchy title, Chris, isn't it? We maybe need to think of a shorter name for this one. But ultimately, this is how we kicked off this campaign, because we at Lace conducted some research, and we spoke to a range of business leaders, HR leaders, transformation leaders, about actually how you deliver the people aspects of business change and whose role it was to support you through that. And clearly the CPO, the HR function, is critical to actually delivering business transformation. Now, you're not the only player, obviously, but you've got some critical capabilities that you really need within your function. And as a CPO, you may be front and center in the conversations about actually how we need to change as an organization, how we're going to deliver our business goals longer term, how you make that happen. That might be everything from organization design capability in terms of restructuring or M&A activity. It might be the insights, the knowledge, the data that you need to inform better business decisions about what needs to change and how. And then finally, it might be the change management capability to transition the organization from position A to position B. What actually goes through, what's involved in that change, and how you can manage that overall. So that business transformation enabler is how we started the campaign, and is very much core to what we see as being a core capability for the CPO, but also the HR function. And are you set up in the way that actually excels in that particular area. And it's maybe the one thing that actually you might not necessarily feel you wholly own within the HR function. You might call on third parties, consultants to help you with this, but actually what sort of capabilities do you need in-house to deliver what is an ongoing level of change in most businesses these days?
Yeah, and Kathy obviously mentioned we kicked off our campaign with this. We've actually got a white paper which touches on some of these areas. So if you want to check that one out, again, just go back to the Demystifying HR's Operating Model campaign page. It's focused on workforce transformation. So check it out. And we do call out some of those elements as well. Now, fourth hat. The head is getting quite wobbly now because we're wearing so many of those hats. But the compliance champion. Talk to me about the compliance champion.
I think this is an interesting one, right? A lot of CPOs or HR leaders may be involved in the REMCO, right? They might run the remuneration committee for their organisation, or certainly being a key party to it. Ultimately, there are compliance factors, risk management factors, reporting factors that relate to people that the functional ownership rests with the CPO. And therefore, there is a compliance question here around actually how can you ensure that you're managing risk for the business, and which risks are you accountable for as a CPO individually or within your function? How can you remain close to the employee relations, that you're managing the relationship between the employee and the employer in all the geographies that you're operating with? And how can you be aware of and proactively manage that employment relationship in a way that delivers, great business outcomes and great employee outcomes? But ultimately, it's where the buck stops, right, with some of these risks and issues that you're managing in a people function. So the compliance champion for me is a really important role that a CPO personally may well hold around the C-suite in terms of how their ownership of risks and issues related to the business as a whole, but also functional risks and issues that you're consciously managing within the HR function itself. So it can be where you can do things brilliantly, but if things go wrong, again, there's maybe large scale impacts for the organization, not least in terms of PR, but obviously, you can talk about legal impacts and just general sort of perception impacts around how the business is managing its employee relations.
Yeah, certainly. And right at the beginning of when we were talking about each of the four hats, I mentioned, is there any of the hats that, in our experience, perhaps CPOs find a little bit easier to wear, or perhaps there's a hat or two which they find a little bit more of a challenge? So just kind of as we come to the end of this live stream, can you just reflect on which ones you think perhaps some CPOs need to work a little bit more on, or what our experience is as to which ones sometimes maybe fits a little bit easier for some people?
Yeah, and I don't think anyone would necessarily argue with the four hats themselves, in that they are all accountabilities that rest with the HR function or the CPO. But it's really, as you say, someone's background and experience may help them lean more comfortably towards one or the other. I think the one that maybe we get a lot of questions about, and which is why we have the business we have, is around the business transformation enabler, because ultimately that can actually be a very peak and trough activity. You don't necessarily need all of the capabilities all the time to deliver business transformation, although I would argue that the level of business transformation is pretty constant these days, but there are peaks and troughs, right? So actually that one is maybe one that certainly talking to CPOs, they feel they maybe need more in-house capability to deliver well. And I think the employee experience one is one where there is an increasing awareness of the need to actively design experiences to deliver on your value proposition and look at everything from an experience lens, as opposed to maybe service or efficiency or process, trying to think of it from the end user perspective. The bulk of your workforce, the lion's share of who maybe is customer facing or delivering the new products or working in your factories, how do they experience work, and how actively are you listening to their experiences and making changes to the experiences so that you are differentiating, you are offering something compelling to enable you to attract and retain talent. That in itself is quite a skill set that often sits within the customer side of the business. And so we talk about customer experience. How can you bring those skills into the HR function?
Yeah, certainly. Of course, as all of the topics of the four hats that we've spoken about, as I mentioned right at the beginning of this live stream, we're going to be talking about in a blog, which we will shortly be releasing. But of course, we go into a lot of the detail around a whole variety of different subjects. I've already touched upon a couple of podcast and blog content and white papers that we've already produced on our Demystifying HR's Operating Model campaign. Kathy, thank you very much for walking me through the four hats today.
Pleasure. Really good to be on my first live session.
First one, but not the last. And thank you very much for tuning in for this live stream. We hope you've enjoyed it. And if you've got any questions about the campaign, you can either drop Kathy or myself an email, or check out our website. You can go on to lacepartners.co.uk/insights. You can see all of our campaigns that we've got, the employee experience revolution that we've talked about, HR's operating model, plus our various white papers as well. But for myself, from Kathy, thank you very much for tuning in today. And yeah, we'll catch you next week for our next HR on the Offensive live stream. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.